Another diet out there is called the body ecology diet. This one definitely is one of my favorites as well. This diet implements a lot of fermented foods. They do something called young coconut kefir, and they also do different ratios between your carbs and your starches, your non-starches. And when you're looking at this diet, a lot of people love this diet because of the fermented foods that they implement. Basically, a fermented food, for most of us, we might not know what that means, or a cultured veggie, we might not know what that means. When you look at sauerkraut, that is a fermented food. However, Donna Gates discovered and invented this diet. Brilliant, brilliant woman. And definitely look on her website. They have free YouTubes that you can go on and watch, and she'll take you step by step on how to make a lot of those recipes and implement that into the diet. Many of us will have crossover diets here, so maybe we do a version of a specific carbohydrate diet and then add the fermented foods in, and we're still doing a gluten-free, casein-free diet, but maybe taking out the sugar and the soy, or maybe we're rotating things. But again, these are just diets for you to understand and really get a better definition for. Now, I already talked about what is gluten and what is casein, so you're aware of that. One thing to think about is becoming a diet detective. What that means is what we put in our bodies has a direct effect on how we act, feel, and behave. What that means is everything we eat, everything we drink, that's going to create some type of feeling in us. As an adult, many of us may drink a glass of wine. Well, how do we feel after we drink a glass of wine? Often when I ask that question, many people might say, oh, I feel relaxed, or I feel good, maybe I get a headache, maybe I get a little dizzy. There is no wrong answer. What that shows us is, again, exactly what I first said, is what we put in our bodies has a direct effect on how we act, feel, and behave. The same thing with our kiddos. What we're feeding them is basically helping them be able to either have good behavior, lethargic behavior, better behavior, hyper behavior. And so it's really important for us to be food detectives and get a journal and start to write down everything they eat. And on top of that, write down their behaviors. So it's not just what they're eating, but it's how they're behaving. And on top of that, we also want to look for different signs. So we want to look for things like red cheeks, dark circles, red ears, constipation, diarrhea, hyperactivity, if they're feeling more lethargic, moody, aggressive. We want to look for food particles in their stool, sleeping issues, sensory issues like walking on your toes. All of those play a role in what is going on in their bodies due to the foods they're eating and their digestion. And so we want to write all of that down, and sometimes you might see a pattern maybe after a week or so. And even if you had an allergy test done with a doctor, perhaps they're not showing high on the allergy marks, but you notice, gosh, every time I give them this particular food, I see this particular reaction. So it's important for us to really take note of that. And also, when we have this food journal, now we're able to hand that off to our nutritionist if we start to work with one, or our specialized doctor, or our pediatrician, whoever we're using as somebody to guide us through this. And a lot of times they'll see something that maybe you won't. So again, just a really easy tool that we can do. And then I wanted to answer the question, and I get this a lot. There might be some of you out there that might say, I tried the diet and it didn't work. Where should I go from here? Well, before you give up on the diet, what I would say is, first of all, my question to you would be, were there any infractions? It's not like when I say the word diet and maybe you're trying to lose weight and maybe you're really good for 5 days and then maybe on the weekends you say, oh, I'm just going to eat what I want, and then Monday comes and you're really good again, and then Saturday, Sunday come and you eat what you want again, right? That is not the way we look at it when we're looking at these specialized diets or lifestyles that we are implementing into our children that have digestive issues. What we want to do is make sure that there are no infractions. So again, it's not like you can go to Johnny's birthday party and have a little bit of chocolate cake, or maybe grandma and grandpa come over and they're like, oh, but I made these special cookies and I know that, Becky really, really loves them, and so, it's just 1 or 2 cookies and I only see Becky maybe twice a month, and, I really want to do something special for Becky. Well, again, that means you're having infractions. And so what we want to do is we want to have no infractions. What we want to look at this as, it'd be the same as if perhaps you had a peanut allergy or if you were diabetic. When I think of a child who is on the spectrum who can benefit from diets, I literally look at it with the same eyes and the same mindset as if a child had a peanut allergy. I would never, ever think of having an infraction and giving them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If a child was diabetic, I would never think to give them a sugar cookie. And yet, our children on the spectrum, we somehow believe that, by having those special cookies or those special days, that we're giving them a reward. And yet we see that their gut or isn't feeling well, or we see the dark circles under their eyes, or we see them not being able to have a bowel movement. And it's so important that we really look at it as in a very serious manner. Another thing is, did you add enzymes? And I'll get into what enzymes are in a little bit. But again, enzymes are what are going to help break up that food for proper digestion and absorption. A lot of our kiddos are having enzyme deficiency issues. And again, I'll get into that in a moment. But I don't want you to forget the word enzymes, because that is crucial when we're looking at diets. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot give food without having it be properly digested. If our children are having deficiencies producing the enzymes in order to help break up that food, we need to be able to give them those enzymes so that they can then break up that food, so that way that all of those vitamins and nutrients, number one, will be absorbed, and number two, the foods will be able to be digested in a proper manner, so that way they can have bowel movements. That way they don't get that bloated tummy, and they don't have gas, and they don't get headaches, and the list goes on and on. Another thing is, if you said, I tried the diet and it didn't work, perhaps you tried the gluten-free, casein-free diet and that's where you stopped. One thing you can do is you can rotate things within that diet. A lot of us get so stuck on, okay, it says it's gluten-free, casein-free, and we end up giving them the very same foods that they were originally eating, so chicken nuggets, pizza, waffles, cookies, and crackers, and maybe mac and cheese. And we just do it in a gluten-free version. However, perhaps a lot of those particular foods either have a lot of rice or have a lot of potato or a lot of corn or a lot of soy. So what we might want to do is rotate the potato and the rice. So if I were to give potato, I would probably give Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and maybe rice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and maybe rotate things on Sunday. I may eliminate the corn and the soy and the sugar from the diet. And then be able to kind of see, now is the diet working better? Another thing is, you don't always have to be stuck on one diet. Perhaps you need to look into the diet we talked about, like specific carbohydrate diet or the body ecology diet. Perhaps we need to add fermented foods or young coconut kefir. And again, these are things to consider. I want to be clear again that not one child is like the next child. All of us have heard, do you know somebody with autism? And people say, yeah. Well, that means you know one kid, because not one child is exactly the same as another. So it's very important for us to look at those options that we have in front of us, almost like a menu, and be able to pick off of that menu and really be able to look at all options in front of us and not give up if one thing doesn't work. And again, it doesn't mean a diet doesn't work. It just means you perhaps haven't found the right diet. A lot of times people will tell me, gosh, what do I have left to feed my child if I take away the corn, or I rotate the potato and the rice, or perhaps I even take away the potato and rice, and I take away the bread, and I take away the milk. What's left? Well, I like to think about what my grandmother cooked when I was younger. And I want you to think about this. We had a meat. We might have had a vegetable. Perhaps we had, I'm thinking maybe we had some applesauce or some type of fruit. And maybe we had a roll and some milk. That might have been, a typical dinner for us. Okay, so now I do a gluten-free, casein-free version of a milk, because I could do a potato milk, I could do a rice milk, I could do a coconut milk, I could do a almond milk. So again, there's different types of options in there. Another thing is, so I'm switching that out. The bread, I can do a gluten-free, casein-free version of that. Maybe I do a nut roll instead. And now I look at that, and I still have my meat. I still have my veggie. I may still have a little bit of applesauce or pear sauce or whichever kind of fruit you like. And again, I have a version of a beverage. And when you think of it that way, it really doesn't seem that hard. The other thing is when you're looking for just even gluten-free, casein-free options, think about going into the produce section and the meat departments. For the most part, you're almost already in the gluten-free, casein-free section. Many of us believe if we can't buy prepackaged foods, or we can't drive through a convenient, fast food place, or we can't easily go to a restaurant, then it makes it so hard. However, think about how many of us grew up. I don't remember, growing up with a lot of prepackaged foods. That was considered a special treat. So for those of you that say it's too expensive to actually do this diet, basically think about, how we were raised. We didn't have, the option of going through the drive-thrus. We didn't have, going to restaurants every night. Those were considered very special treats. At least it was for us. And when I think about how I grew up, everything I ate pretty much was from the produce department or the meat department. And, when you think about it in those terms, it's actually less expensive than more expensive. There's other ways to be creative. You can go to your local farmer's market. You can try to buy in bulk at some of the health food markets that, will give discounts for case discounts. There's definitely ways you can look at co-ops. I mean, there really are ways to help save cost on that. Now I want to talk about bringing diet and enzymes together. Like I said, you can't do one without the other. They work synergistically together in the body. Many of you guys might have heard about the brain-gut connection, right? And what that means is, there's definitely that connection there. What's going on in here affects what's going on in here. If I have a tummy ache, do you really think that I can sit in algebra class and be able to function as they're trying to teach me formulas? Because when I'm not feeling well, let's say I have a bad headache and I have a tummy ache, all I'm hearing the teacher say is wah 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 wah, almost like Charlie Brown. When we hear we hear that teacher from Charlie Brown, it's the same thing. We need to be able to feel good from the inside out. How do you think our kiddos are feeling when they're in therapy and we're trying to do speech, or we're trying to do occupational therapy or physical therapy or behavioral therapy or play therapy or sensory integration therapy? How do you think any of them are feeling when their tummies are not doing well? And if they can't speak to us, let's say they're nonverbal, of course they're going to do things like hit their head or be aggressive or perhaps walk on their toes or not want to sit down still. Because again, we need to be able to figure out what's going on from the inside out. Another thing to consider is leaky gut. How I think of leaky gut is I think of like these little holes in the gut, and basically what's happening as we are eating the food, proteins are leaking through, so the food is leaking through the gut, crossing the blood-brain barrier and attaching to the same receptors as opiates. Now, by no means am I saying that it is an opiate. However, we do call it an opioid. What that means is it basically gives a similar feeling. So when our kids, for example, and I remember